All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Cuatro Cuatro Dos. Once again, this is your boy Christian, and today we are taking the podcast somewhere else. We went to Australia. Now we're going. We went to Morocco too. We spoke to a Moroccan about his experiences about the World Cup. Being a Morocco fan, and a Moroccan himself. And now we're gonna go to a little interesting place in the world, which is Canada. We're going to Victoria, Canada, the West Coast. Kind of the West Coast, right over there. And we're gonna be talking to Joshua. What was
Josh is
no matter.
perfect.
So Joshua Rendle. He's a Canadian Argentinian Canadian, a little mix of both. I thought it would be cool to get the experience of a person like him who lived in both worlds and understands this world that we lived in North America, but also understands the passion that happens in Argentina. So Josh, how you doing, man? How are you?
First of all, I'm doing really well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be on this and to chat a little bit more about my experiences and obviously Argentina CAMPEON. So I'm
There
excited.
You go. We're starting off on the right foot. There you go. Just in case you have forgotten, Argentina won the World Cup, so Argentina campeón. Just to make sure everybody knows where we're coming from.
Absolutely.
But yeah, man. So you are Canadian, but you also lived in Argentina. Can you tell me when that transition happened? Were you born in Argentina? Were you born in Canada? Where did you go first?
Yeah, so this is a question I get a lot. I am Canadian. I only have one passport. I get that asked a lot as well. I was born in Victoria, Canada, but with my parents' working for an NGO, I ended up actually growing up with 3 other siblings abroad, mostly in Latin America. So the first few years of my life in Caracas, Venezuela, and then I spent about 6-7 years in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and then high school in the States, in Denver, Colorado, and then back here in Canada. So now I'm just trying to, I'm kind of traveling the world essentially with football and soccer. So
that's dope. You're living the dream of many, I would say. So how old were you when you lived in Argentina? Because I think that information is going to be vital. Because I think teenage years, from like 10 to like 15, those are the years that a person kind of becomes a person in a way, right? In my opinion, like it leaves that mark in your heart. So how old were you when you lived over there?
That's actually quite funny that you just said 10 to 15 because it was, I believe, 8 or 9 to about 14. So it was about 3rd grade to 8th grade. So it was very much a time of my life where the imprint of Argentinian culture was very much left on me.
So since you went from Canada to Caracas and then to Buenos Aires, was it easier to like pick up the language? I mean, you were a kid. Usually, kids pick up quicker than adults. Was it easier to like pick up the language, or was it kind of tough that like change?
Yeah, no, it's actually quite funny. It was a bit of a difficult thing actually. My dad, fortunately, he actually grew up in Colombia, and so he speaks Spanish fluently and very much helped me and my siblings learn Spanish. I actually struggled a lot when I was really young because between like the ages of 0 to 4, because I was just I couldn't figure out what language to speak because I would go to a Spanish speaking school, but at home I was speaking English and it was a bit of a mess. But it was very much helpful going from Venezuela to Argentina. Obviously, when I get to Argentina, my accent goes straight to Castellano and Porteño, and there I was going full Argentine there. So it was, and then going to Denver, Colorado, then where most of my friends were Mexican. So then my accent just all over the place. So
that's a good combination there. Because I remember when coming to the States, I was like, bro, like the quick story. But I remember like one time, in Argentina, soda is like agua con gas, and the teacher was like, oh, name, digan un nombre de algún líquido que tenga gas. And I was like, oh, soda. And everybody laughed because like, just the language, stupid joke or stupid story. But the point is that I would say a bunch of things, be like, oh, like all the little kids would be like, say pollo. And I would be like, pollo. And I was like, bro, like, why are y'all laughing? Yeah. But, it's the struggles. I'm sure you probably struggled a little bit too with your English. You know, kind of because Argentinians can be a little assholes, but that's okay. But tell me, let's get into the soccer part of things. So you know, you go to Argentina, right? I assume you picked up soccer real quick, as most, you know, guys do, you know, at that age. Tell me, did you get to play for any like barrio, you know, clubs, neighborhood clubs? Did you maybe
Yeah.
something like that?
So this is actually a funny story. So I in Venezuela I played for a local club there for a short time when I was a little kid, and then in Argentina I went to a international school, American international school in Zona Norte, and so there I was able to play quite a lot. But I was actually also playing hockey, inline hockey on the side in Argentina, which people don't usually associate hockey with Argentina, and I ended up playing for the youth teams in Buenos Aires in Argentina there. So that was a lot of fun playing there. But it was quite funny having the mixture because I'd play soccer and I'd play hockey throughout my weekends, throughout my weeks, and it was quite funny how Argentines would associate the two sports. Like that passion of Argentines was very much in hockey as well. So it was a very exciting time, but. Yeah, while I was in Argentina, I mostly just played school soccer, which I wish I had played some club soccer. I was going to go to some tryouts with Platense and a few other clubs, but just the way that it worked, because Argentine youth soccer works a little bit different than most of the world. So yeah.
Very different. I remember before coming to the US, I went to go try for Lanús. But yeah, it's one of those like what if, right? But it's all
Absolutely.
right. It's all right. I'll cry later. Um, but tell me, so I remember, you know, going back to my childhood, I remember like, you know, can I could not wait to come, you know, home from school and just go outside and play with the boys, you know, like just kick it around. Did you get to experience that as well? You know, just going out there, you know, kick the ball around and, you know, with the neighborhood kids?
Absolutely. That's one thing that I absolutely love about having had the opportunity to grow up in South America was very differently than kind of what I experienced here in North America. I was able to whenever you had time, you would just go grab a ball and go play on the street or go play in the fields. One thing always, because summer and winter are different in the Southern Hemisphere. In January, while all my friends in Canada were stuck in their homes full of snow, I was with my brother going into 30, 40-degree weather, just dying of heat, but just having so much fun playing soccer, and then jumping in your pool at the end of the day or in the Rio de la Plata or whatever, even though that wasn't the cleanest place ever, but it was just so much fun as a kid. So yeah.
And I think this might be one of the most important questions that I might ask you on this show. But in Chile, no, what team did you support, and can you tell me any of the memories of you supporting that said team? If just, you know, let me say this: if you supported a team that, you know, has a red and white shirt, you can keep the stories, you know.
Yeah,
But
that
any
that
other
that
team,
story will never be told. Don't worry. I've never been a River fan. That is not a. Can't believe I just even said that. But I actually I have a few little quick anecdotes about this. So I grew up a Boca fan, a Seinese.
there you go.
I'm very much a Bostero. It was quite funny because I always my parents weren't big, they're very Canadian and didn't wouldn't push me really to go to a Boca game or anything. But unfortunately, we had a few schools from Canada that would come down and we'd host them, and they would want to go to Boca games, so they would actually bring me as a translator as this little 12, 13-year-old. And so I actually went to a Boca Lanús game. Lanús ended up winning 2-0. I think Pavone was playing for Lanús at the time, former
Okay.
River player. And so it was a heated day at the Bombonera. And it was so funny because me as a little 12, 13-year-old, I'm with all these Canadians that don't really understand why these Argentines are going so crazy and so angry. So because I felt so Argentine there, I was just so pouty and so angry. And they were just so confused why this 12, 13-year-old kid just wouldn't talk to them, was just looking down, was so angry, so pissed off. And I was like, guys, this is part of the culture here. This is you can't be happy after watching what Pavone just did to our team here. And it was just quite funny. But another quick anecdote that was crazy was I was one of those kids that I think a lot of people can associate with, in terms of I would walk around with my jersey and my team hat everywhere. So I wore my Boca jersey, Boca hat everywhere. And so I would always we'd fly back to Canada at Christmas, and I'm in Ezeiza in the international airport in Buenos Aires, flying back with my family, and I'm just lying back on a table waiting to go through immigration and all this, and this big guy walks in with blonde hair, and I was like, this guy looks quite familiar, and I just couldn't figure it out. And I'm wearing Boca hat, Boca shirt, and all of a sudden a bunch of people start coming up to me, hey, do you realize that's Martin Palermo, that's Palermo.
No.
And I start freaking out, and I didn't know what to do. I was like, no way, like how do I he was definitely trying to hide his face, like he didn't really want people to come up to him and all this. And so it was quite funny because I was so nervous as this little 12-year-old kid to go up to him to ask him for anything that I ended up not actually, no, I think we got a signature from him, and then turns out he actually was on the same plane as my family. So then we land in Chile, and turns out he's on the same flight waiting at the same gate to go to Toronto for some reason. And so I built up the courage with my brother to go get a photo with Palermo. So I still have a photo with Palermo.
That's dope.
It was a great story. But anyways, long story short, that was my childhood. And now I'm a Platense fan. I am a calamar, a squid. And the team is brown, so we're the Marrón. It is the team from Saavedra, Argentina. The story is quite funny because I was leaving Argentina. I was about 13 years old, and one of our good family friends, who's a fanático of Platense, showed up to the airport, and his parting gift was a Platense jersey. And I was so confused at the time because Platense was a third division team. I knew of them, and I knew he would go to games, but it didn't really associate with me that much and all this. But I always had this jersey. And so fast forward a few years, I'm just kind of tracking a little bit of Platense, and I see that they got a promotion to the second division, and then I see they're in the final to make it to the first division, and I'm starting to lose my mind because I just have this weird connection to this team in second division Argentina. I just never understood it. And then they win the penalty shootout. I'm on my phone watching the game in Squamish, Canada. It's in the mountains essentially. And I'm losing my mind in a bar with my brother, and they're all looking at me like, who is this guy? What is he yelling about? And I couldn't explain it. So anyways, I became a Platense fan, and that was where it was born. And yeah.
That's cool. And how do you see well, I mean, I imagine you're like living the dream now, Platense en Primera now.
Platense en Primera, absolutely. So I'm definitely living the dream right now. I've had a massive opportunity over the last few years, since they've been back, to watch the games. I don't miss a game. If I'm out, I have it on my phone, so it's super exciting. And I also I have the opportunity now that I actually get to post. I run the official English account for Platense now, so nice. It's the world comes around, and it's super exciting to follow this small little team from Saavedra. So. With very passionate fans, as Argentines always are. So
it's always cool when like the people like running the pages or running, like they're also fans, because like you can see their passion right on those like tweets or Instagram posts or whatever it may be. I think it's like the coolest thing ever. So I'm happy for you, man. Like, just seeing,
appreciate it.
Yeah, just from a fan to like actually working with the club, it's amazing. But I want to know, let me just tell you a quick story before we move on, because it's not my Palermo story, but it's my Palermo story. When I was a kid, I don't know if you remember, but Palermo was like signed to Puma, and he came out with the blue and yellow Pumas.
Yep.
Yeah, so I had those, and I would wear them everywhere to play, to go to school. Like, I wouldn't take those things off. And then I'm sure you remember this, but when Palermo like shaved his head and he left a little mechon, the yellow. All my cousins had it. I had at least 3 cousins that had that haircut, and I begged my mom so hard to get it done, and she would have let me. She was like, "No, you can't do that. Like, it's muy bichero." And I was like, "Mom, please." But I never got it. But it's one of those things that I was like, "Damn!" Like, well, at least I got the shoes, because my cousins couldn't get the shoes, but they got the haircut. But yeah, that's my Palermo story.
I love it. Hey,
Uh,
it's never too late. You can always do it. He's now the coach of Platense, so the world really comes around.
right? How crazy is that? No, well, now one of my little what were these called? It's like una promesa que hice, like if Argentina were to win, I was gonna get the yellow line
Dibu, Dibu
of
Martinez.
well, no, I'm going way back. I'm going Maradona. You know when he came back and he had yeah. So but I don't know. I think I might have to cut my hair for that because it's gonna look weird just having like a weird yellow stripe on my head. But we'll get that done eventually. But yeah, those are my Boca stories there. But I want to know how the transition was from going, full Argentinian to going back to what you went to Colorado. How was that shock? Especially at that age where most, like I said, most guys at that age are trying to find themselves, and it's just like a culture shock, right?
Yeah. So I used a lot of as you mentioned, I was really big into soccer growing up. I played soccer all throughout my childhood, and when I was moving back to North America, I actually lived in Canada for a year, and then spent the rest of my schooling in the States in Denver. And it was very much a decision time where at that age you kind of have to, if you want to try to go pro, you need to go one or the other. And so I ended up choosing soccer at the end. And so I actually ended up playing when I was in ninth grade in Canada. I was playing for an academy in my city in Victoria, and then in the States I was playing for the Rapids Academy. So it was a lot of fun. Very cold days in Colorado with the snow and such, but I had so much fun, and I would use soccer to actually make friends and do all of that. And it was tough because when I first moved from Victoria to Denver, we drove down the day of the tryouts for the Rapids, and dumb move first of all because of the altitude, and so it's because my hometown is at sea level. So I went up to the mile high city of Denver, Colorado, and was just struggling through tryouts, and I actually fractured my hip in my first
Dang.
tryouts. So I spent my first year in Denver, where I would normally make friends through soccer, not being able to play the sport. So that was a struggle, and then it was definitely tough because cultures are very different, and also the way that I look, where I look like I'm North American and such, and look Canadian, being in a different culture but feeling like you're Argentine, or and also where I would almost speak more Spanish than English sometimes. I didn't know where I belonged. So usually I would just use soccer as the way to do that. So the first year was definitely a struggle, but my junior and senior year, 11th and 12th grade, I just jumped fully into soccer and had a great time with my team. I think it was the second or third time our high school had ever made it to state. And then I played in Canada at a university for a year in Langley, which is about an hour outside of Vancouver, in the Canadian University League. And then basically played a bit of, I was like the reserve team of the local semi-pro team in my town. And then I decided to pursue my career. So I actually transferred schools, kind of gave up somewhat my professional career essentially to go after the sports industry. So I was studying sport management, and that's kind of what kickstarted my whole career path into what I am now. So yeah.
Nice. And going into that, you talked about the semi-pro team, right? And kind of to stay in that line, I wanted to ask you, do you follow any, are you a fan of any like either Canadian teams or even the MLS? Or because I know you mentioned something like that.
Yeah, yes. So I've always wanted to be involved in sport. I think I relate to a lot of people where I grew up playing a stupid amount of FIFA, stupid amount of career mode, so much Ultimate Team. Too much. Everything revolved around soccer, and I don't know how many people. I have a lot of friends that have the same problem where your parents would say, "What is this knowledge going to help you with in the future?" And you're like, "Hey, I love the sport. I love my team. Come on." And so, anyways, I went into sport management, absolutely loved it, and I ended up doing an internship for a local semi-pro team in Victoria, called the Victoria Highlanders. I did that for a year or so, and then the Canadian League essentially I won't draw this out too long, but essentially Canada wanted to make the World Cup and wanted to make the next World Cup because we are hosting along with the States and Mexico. And so a bunch of players former national team players wanted to start a Canadian league. And if you're wondering, there is 3 teams right now in the MLS that are Canadian, but
Yeah.
The problem with that is that those teams are essentially American, and it's a bit of a complicated situation because they all play within a league that's essentially American. And so Canada's a massive country. There's over 40 million people in the country. And as a kid growing up in Canada playing soccer, this was actually one of the biggest cultural shocks to me when I moved from Argentina was when you play soccer in Argentina, your goal is to be a professional player. And that was always the end goal. And you would grind, work so hard and all this. And when I went to Canada, the academy I was playing in is some of the best players locally in my town in high school. And their goals were to play university. Not one of them had a necessarily a professional goal because it was out of reach. So I was actually I was fortunate enough to be part of a new league that started in Canada, the Canadian Premier League. And it's a fully professional league. I believe it had 6 to 8 teams that started it from the west to the east coast of Canada, which is the second longest trip out of any domestic league in the world. So
Dang.
the longest one is Russia, I believe, which is from one point to the other. But basically Victoria to Halifax, I believe it's a 7-8 hour trip. So you're going a long ways by plane. So,
Plane.
Yeah, exactly. It's a long trip. So I had the opportunity to work and start this team called Pacific Football Club here in my local city, Victoria, in Langford. And I had the opportunity to work for them for 2 years in marketing and such, and social media and writing articles. And it was just incredible to see how literally starting a team from nothing and a league from nothing, and having the opportunity to meet players, professional players, and also the opportunities to the young players in Canada that otherwise would have been just released by their clubs and would have nowhere else to go other than university. So when I ended up leaving the team to go on to this other opportunity with the company I work for now, but I've always stayed passionate about my team, about Pacific. And so I think we were talking about this a little bit before this, that despite not being able to live in Buenos Aires, I wanted to bring a bit of that barra brava, to Canada, which, if anybody knows Canadians, we're known as very nice people that don't get very angry, that are just very polite and all of this. And all of those things are very much true. However, we're a country of immigrants, and so we bring that passion from all over the world. We started a supporters group that's called the TOP, and it's actually a bunch of Brazilians and me and a few other Latinos, and
Nice.
It's Torcida Organizada Pacific, and we sing all game. We sing all the chants that you would hear in Argentina with a little bit of our own twist on it. And yeah, it's so much fun. It's a lot of fun. That's the team that I'm able to really be passionate about here locally in my community, and at the same time be able to follow that craziness that I grew up with. So
it's dope how the cultures like meet, right? Like soccer is such a link between different cultures, and you know, on one side of the world, you're living in Argentina, going to La Bombonera and looking at those maniacs, jumping up and down, and you can kind of, replicate that in Canada, in Victoria, Canada, that, like you said, it may be not known for getting crazy, not known for getting all rowdy, but it's cool to see, how people like yourself bring that together. So I commend you as an outsider and soccer fan. I love the fact that people, get to do that in their hometowns. But moving on to the next question. Now, you stay in that world of communication and stuff like that. I don't know if you want to touch on that, or
Sure. Yeah.
maybe?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've always been what's I guess people try to find their why or what drives them, and I've been fortunate enough to follow in the career path that just drives me and makes me want to wake up and get out of bed every morning. So what that is just being able to storytell and the content around what what this sport does to communities and how it brings communities together, and the passion. Something that always blew my mind as a kid in Argentina was just seeing how, because people would refer to Argentines for the most part when you live in Argentina as they're typically very respectful people, and they take you in and very hospitable and all this. And people always wonder, like, how do Argentines get angry and it's essentially what you would say is there's 90 minutes of a game at a stadium a few blocks away that's where everything gets released. 90 minutes of and I actually I have a funny story about this. Our friend of ours of my family's that would go to the Platense games. Super nice guy, amazing nice guy. He's American Argentine, and he would. I never went to games with him, to Platense games with him, and I heard stories of people that went to games with him where he would go jump on the fence and just start shaking the fence, and they're like, who is this guy? This isn't the same guy we've been hanging out with all week. And it's just, I was always so fascinated with that passion, because you don't see it in almost anything else. And so this is kind of what drove me into what I do now. So I was really fortunate to work up from basically social media coordinator up to a marketing coordinator for Pacific FC. And then I had the opportunity to, this is a bit of a story. I was looking for a way to watch Boca and in university. This is before working in sports, and I found this app called Fanatiz, Fanatiz. Sorry, Z, that's a very Canadian way I just said that. But so it's this company that legally streams it worldwide, the Liga Argentina, legally outside of Argentina. And so I started watching it, and I realized there's a few mistakes in the English on the website. So I sent an email saying I need an internship for my university. And the next day, Matias Rivera, the CEO, wrote back to me and asked if I wanted an internship. So in my second year of university, I was able to do a whole semester internship with Fanatiz. And at the time, they were a small startup out of Santiago, Chile. They had, I think it was 8 or 9 employees, and so it was quite the operation, because as you can imagine, startups, it was so small. They were just figuring out the whole streaming thing. This is before streaming was a big kind of deal, and so it was definitely an exciting year. And then I went into sports and worked in all these clubs and stuff. And so while I was working for these clubs, I reached out back to Matias, the CEO, and turns out, which I hadn't realized, that the company had exploded over COVID, because as sad and unfortunate of everything that happened throughout that period, there was a few things that did very well, and one of them was streaming, because everybody was sitting at home watching sports.
Yeah.
And so I got connected and back into a marketing role with Fanatiz, and the company had gone from those 7 or 8 people in their first few years to it was over 100 people at the time that I joined. So it was quite the growth of a company. They had La Liga at the time with beIN Sports, and so I was covering Messi in Barcelona, and I had some amazing opportunities. I got to meet Serginho Dest, for example, and I got to talk to all these different people, and it was an amazing start. And so since then, basically what I do is my role with Fanatiz is I work as a content analyst. And so my responsibility is everything to do with the product, the content, and how we connect our content with both VOD and live content with our subscribers and our potential subscribers. So exactly what I love to do, of being able to tell stories of passion. And right now I'm working on a project about Potreros de la Selección, which is episodes of the national team that just won the cup. So very, very, very exciting stuff that I get to do now. So yeah.
That's so cool. That's so cool because like I told you earlier, I'm love documentaries and like soccer documentaries and anything related to that. completely love and support like Copa 90 on
Oh, I love Copenhagen.
on
Yeah.
YouTube, Tirando Data, talking about all the small clubs in Argentina, like stuff like that. I'll watch it no matter what, even if it's in a different language. I'll watch it just to watch, the people get crazy and rowdy.
Absolutely.
It's fun,
I,
and
I
I'm
so
go
sorry
ahead.
to budge in. There's one
Yeah,
story that actually just reminded me. I actually came in as the community manager of Fanatis, and it was a crazy, crazy job that I came into because I almost couldn't believe how amazing it was because the whole point of Fanatis is it's a small company, and so they live the passion rather than these big corporations. And so my whole job was to connect with expats, so Argentines that live in Australia, that live in Fiji, that live in Ireland, that live in Canada, that live in China, that live in Mongolia, and connect with them and chat with them and make sure that they're having the best experience ever watching Boca or River outside of Auckland, New Zealand. And so I have some crazy, amazing stories that were just so cool to see how much this sport just transcends all cultures and across the globe. So it's been an amazing opportunity over the last few years.
let me kind of dig into that. It was like the was the like I don't know if weird is the right word, but was the most like random play that you're like, oh snap, like people are watching like the La Liga from all the way over there.
So one of our biggest games that we have is obviously the Super Clásico. And so
Yeah,
around Super Clásico time, my goal, I always want to try to find some of the craziest fans in some of the weirdest or quirkiest places in the world and try to make some content around it. And so there was one Super Clásico where I wanted to get as many peñas, filiales of Boca River from around the world and see how many videos I could get in their own languages. Vamos Boca or Vamos River or whatever. And I have the video, I can send it to you at some point, but it was so crazy because we had like Boca, for example, we had guys from Kuwait in Arabic, and they were Kuwaitis, they weren't Argentines, they were Kuwait people that absolutely love Boca, that were using Fanatis, and they sent us a bunch of things. We had a guy from Morocco send us something in Arabic. There's River Plate Noruega, an amazing guy who runs their Twitter account. He's Norwegian Argentine, and he said it in Norwegian, Vamos River. And then we have lots of traveling Argentines that are literally in Bali, and they send us crazy videos, or players that send us stuff as well that's super crazy, like Pipa Benedetto, for example, when he was in Elche and Marseille. He would use Fanatis to watch every single Boca game. Like he literally didn't miss a game, and it's so cool to kind of see even the players. They just have the passion, the garra of so many of the fans, and that's what fans live for. So it's very cool.
That's so cool. That's so cool how like people are just around the world. They're kind of like you live through them. You live through them. They live through you. I don't know. It's kind of weird, but I think it's just the coolest thing ever. And since we're in that passion, talking about crazy feelings and stuff like that, let's talk about the World Cup. What we came to talk about, right? Before we get to Argentina, I wanted to ask you about Canada because obviously you're Canadian, or partly. And me myself, actually, when we did a little whatever it's called, that we picked our teams, one of the options that we were doing with the boys was pick your dark horse, the team that maybe nobody's looking at and they're gonna maybe blow up. And I picked Canada because I thought the Canadian team looked really good. CONCACAF, they came out first in the table. They were looking pretty solid, really good teams. You had this kid on the left flank, Bayern Munich. A bunch of Canadians are starting to blow up. In the soccer world. And so, what were your expectations, maybe as a Canadian, to in this team that hasn't been in the world, the first time in how many years, since '86, and that y'all made it back?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, being a Canadian fan it's a roller coaster and a half for sure. In a country where hockey is our sport, at hockey and lacrosse, our two big sports here. It's being a soccer fan here is always a struggle because you always just see the U.S. and Mexico taking everything. So it's been a super exciting last few years, and the team is super young. They have some incredible players. Obviously, Alphonso Davies, Jonathan David are two of kind of the key players that a lot of people know. But across the board, we have so many young stars, and this was a part of the reason why I was working in this league, in this club, was to be able to provide more players for that national team. And so one of the key pieces that I think he doesn't get enough credit, in my opinion, is John Herdman, the coach of Canada. He's an Englishman that couldn't kind of find the opportunities in England, so he moved to Canada to start coaching and to kind of push on his career. And he took our women's team to the next level, essentially, and then switched over to the men's team and has been growing this massive project here. And ultimately for the upcoming World Cup, for the next one that we're hosting along with the US and Mexico. But it's crazy. Like, I couldn't believe all through qualifiers watching the Mexico game. When we beat Mexico in Edmonton, I was losing my mind. When we beat the States, it was incredible, because obviously me having played in the US soccer system and having so many American friends, being able to boast about that was just incredible. And as well, I have not in the qualifiers, but one of my old teammates actually went to Qatar with the team, Joel Waterman. So it was just seeing him playing at that level was just unbelievable. And so the team it's one of those things that there's so much talent in this country, but they just never they haven't had the opportunity to really be in the spotlight. And this is finally where we have the systems in place, we have the right coach, and we have a strong young team. So going into the World Cup, I think it was the first time that I've seen in my lifetime that I've seen Canada as a country get behind our men's soccer team specifically. Our women's soccer team has amazing supporters, and they're so good. And I Christine Sinclair and Jordan Heitema and all that. But the men's team, I just never had that hype. And so it was the first time everywhere in this country you started seeing Alphonso Davies, started seeing soccer related things, and it's wild. And I'm sure you get this as being in the US versus in Argentina, where everything is related to soccer. It's just so crazy to finally experience that in your own country. And so being able to see them go to the World Cup, I was a little bit worried, but very optimistic. I'm always a glass half full person. I just kept telling everybody, saying we need to beat Morocco, we need to get points off of Croatia, and we need to just hope to God we don't get 5 goals scored against Belgium. All of those went out the window, as everybody saw in the World Cup. It became a little bit of I think Canada hadn't played in that form of a tournament before, in terms of in the qualifiers you'd play 1 or 2 games, but playing 3 massive games like that so close for a decently young team was definitely a bit, I think, of a wake-up call almost to the players, because they know when they play really well and very together, they can beat anybody, essentially. Not anybody, but can beat a lot of teams. And so I think the Belgium game just showed that we could take on kind of anybody. And then I think it was a little bit of Croatia and Morocco just had such good World Cups. And what Canadians coming out of the World Cup are looking at it, despite losing all the games, we came out of it with a lot of hope and happiness, knowing that we just scored a goal, which might sound funny, but it was just being able to have that hope and knowing that almost this entire team is going to be going to the next World Cup is nuts. I don't think there's a lot of teams in the World Cup that have that opportunity to have the same squad and roster. So other than we had Atiba Hutchinson, who is a veteran of the team, plays for Besiktas. He's played in, if I'm not wrong, he's played for the Canadian team for 5 World Cups, and never had an opportunity to go. So he got to go this World Cup, and he played against Luka Modric and played against all these guys. And so it was an amazing opportunity for all of them. But overall, we're happy despite getting trounced essentially by Croatia and Morocco. So yeah,
I mean, if you look at the group, right, you got Belgium, a powerhouse, and then you got Morocco and Croatia, quarterfinalists and semifinalists. I mean,
exactly, exactly. What can you do? When you look back at it, what can you do? It's tough. It's tough.
right. So I mean, hey, I think Canada, like you said, even though the results weren't there, they did, good enough for what they had, I guess. But now Argentina, let's talk about that. Your other side of you in a way, right? Did you, because you were in Argentina for this World Cup, right? Correct?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
When did you decide, like, you know what, even though, Canada first year, you could, because you could have gone that route and
Mhm.
do a whole story, since you like telling stories, you could have
Yeah.
done that whole story of the Canadian team, going back, but you decided to go, to Argentina and maybe tell that story.
Mhm.
Can you tell me what kind of went through your mind when you made that decision in a way?
Yeah, yeah. So I one of the greatest things about my job is that it's a remote job, and there's only one other of the employees that lives in Canada with me. He actually lives 3-4 hours from me, and most of the company lives in South America, or it's Miami, Chile, Argentina, and spots around the world. And so I've worked for the company for just over 2 years now, and never had the opportunity, mainly because of COVID, to travel and meet my coworkers face to face, everything over Zoom and such. So being able to, I kept looking at it. I had this pinned on my brain of World Cup is coming up. I could go to Argentina and meet all my coworkers and tie it all in with my work. So essentially, I planned out a big trip through Miami, Chile, Rio, and then to finishing in Argentina. And
Nice.
it was quite funny because I spent the first week of the World Cup, I was in Rio visiting a lot of my Brazilian friends. And so that Saudi Arabia game, I was in Rio, and then I was in Argentina for the rest. So I wasn't leaving Argentina after that. But, and if anybody that missed that, that is basically the superstition of Argentines. But
Got
yeah,
it. Yeah. I caught it. I caught it.
exactly, exactly. So it was quite exciting. I was so pumped to be in Argentina. Basically I can't say how many times I was asked the question of who are you supporting, Canada or Argentina, and every time, because Argentina, unlike most countries, every single question during World Cup year is about the World Cup. Like, you get into an Uber, you get into a taxi, you go into a restaurant, anywhere you go, it's, oh, what do you think about Messi? What do you think about Argentina? What do you think about the chances? And so they would look at me, see that I don't look Argentine. They'd ask me about Canada's chances and about Argentina. And I would always avoid the question, because I just was praying that Canada would never have to face Argentina, because I would be so split. But every time I would tell people that this World Cup specifically, I wanted Argentina to win, because obviously Leo and Messi, and I was very much part of all the Argentines that cried over the last World Cups and over the last Copa Americas, and just so much pain that there needed to be a positive moment. So I spent, after the first week of the World Cup, I spent the rest of the World Cup all the way till the day after the World Cup in Buenos Aires, Argentina, enjoying it. So yeah.
Let me. I'm gonna dig in a little bit deeper because I wanna hear your emotions throughout each of these games. I don't know if you wanna, just pick the game and then just kind of, a quick a little summary of how you felt, and then when you get to the final, we'll go a little bit deeper to that on that one.
Perfect. Yeah. So Saudi Arabia, I don't really want to talk about it that much. No,
We can skip.
I was struggling in a lot through that game. I was in Brazil and with Brazilian friends that were uh, obviously not the biggest fans of Argentina, and I'm hidden inside watching it on the TV, so no one sees me in Brazil wearing my Argentina jersey and flag. And I'm just losing my mind. And to be fair, the Saudi Arabia goals were pretty nuts. It was a tough game, but it was honestly, as most people say, it was kind of the kick up the butt that Argentina needed. It was good it happened then rather than later in the tournament. So that was kind of the key piece for me watching that game. And then Mexico, I was losing my mind watching that game. I was so happy. Mexico, Poland, those two games, I was just like, Oh, I was so happy that they made it through because it was, uh, there's usually that sense when you support a team like an Argentina or a France or a kind of the bigger countries in terms of the World Cup, that final game isn't that big of a deal. But for Argentina, it's being an Argentina fan, they just make it difficult. You know, you just need to be stressed in your heart always. You need to be ready to go to the hospital at any minute. Evidently, I think that's kind of the phrase of this whole World Cup. But going into the next phases, one thing that I didn't do that I know most Argentines would do. So most Argentines, you have your tradition, game day tradition that you never change, especially after a win. You have the same everything. And when I went to Argentina, I had a lot of coworkers and friends that wanted to welcome me to their homes, quinchos, asados, to watch the games with them. And so I actually went to your area of town where your family's from in Argentina with a good friend in a quincho there and had his quincho and which is essentially a barbecue for anybody that doesn't know what a quincho is. And just had some of the best meat in the world, chimichurri, choripanes, lomo, the whole thing. It was incredible. And just a very, very Argentine game. And that was the same day that Brazil was playing Croatia. And I actually haven't mentioned this to you, but I'm actually dating somebody that is Brazilian, and
Oh
so
damn.
it's a tough one. It's a tough one. This is always a tough conversation when we go into footy.
Well, let me tell you this. Let me tell you this. My wife is Chilena, so
Well, there you go. There you go. Okay. You know, I don't know. I don't know which one's more tough. You know.
yeah, right.
That's amazing. But yeah, so watching Brazil though in Argentina, I'm kind of sitting there not trying to cheer when Brazil's not doing well. However, I'm sitting there with puros argentinos, and when Brazil got scored on in that equalizer against Croatia, and then they go to penalties, I the entire place blew up. It was Argentines losing their minds. It was as if Argentina just won the World Cup. I was losing my. I was a little happy to be honest because I did not want Brazil to play Argentina for relationship's sake. And the Argentina game go to penalties. Lautaro Martinez is taking the final penalty after having a very tough start, and I wish it's throughout the World Cup. It's the only time that as a content and social media person, where I couldn't take out my phone because I was just so in the moment and so just the emotions were everywhere. People are crying. There's people that didn't watch the penalties. They would go outside. People are on their knees praying. It was just everything that you could imagine of passion was there. Little kids screaming. It was just mayhem, chaos. And when Lautaro Martinez scored that goal, I barely knew these people I'm with. I only knew my coworker who I had a few meetings with, and it was literally all his extended family, all of his best friends from growing up, and people are just picking each other up, throwing each other around. It was just like I think somebody got thrown into the pool. It was just mayhem. Anyways, that was kind of the first moment, and I got some chimichurri sauce stained on my Argentina jersey. That jersey did not get washed till the end because superstitions and yeah, it was a wild time because I was in the sur of Buenos Aires, but I was staying in Palermo, which is about 45 to an hour away. And because it's an Argentina games in Argentina, that is the worst day to get sick or to need something because no one's working and you're just out there essentially. And so I got a ride to halfway back to my place, and it's starting to downpour rain. I'm in the middle of Buenos Aires. My phone's at 1%, and I'm like, crap, how am I gonna get home? This is nuts. And I'm trying to find the bondi, the bus, and I can't find the bus stop. Like legitimately asking people, and people are pointing me left, right, center. And I speak Spanish, fortunately, but if I didn't, I would have been a mess. I run out to like the middle of the road, which first of all, never do. And I jump into a taxi, and the guy was just pulling out with a choripan in his mouth, having watched the Argentina game, and he gave me a ride home. And it was just it's just one of those experiences that I don't know. And then obviously we go out because every night you go out, Argentina wins, and you don't sleep for the next 2 days. And it was so much fun. So that was a crazy, crazy game. And then what was after so that was that game was Holland.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Holland.
The crazy one.
Yeah, the crazy one. It is kicking the bench, the whole thing. It was wild. And then the next game, I went to watch with my friends at the Fan Fest. Actually, the semis. Croatia.
3-0.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Thank you for reminding me. Yes. So Croatia semis. I'm in Palermo at the Fan Fest. Thousands of people, super hot, and it was. I think. I don't know if you had the same sense, but it was I walked out of that game looking at my friends saying, I don't feel like my heart's being challenged enough. Like this was after the Holland game, you went into the Croatia game and you come out and you're just so confident and you feel like I should have had more pain. I should have felt more pain because Argentina doesn't normally do this. It was just absurd. And some funny stories at the Fan Fest was that whole thing about superstition. Argentines don't want anything changed, and so I'm sure you saw the grandpa who sat his chair in front of the TV store, and because he didn't have a TV at home, and it was closed, but you could kind of see through the slits at a TV. And because Argentina won that game, he did it every single game till the store ended up giving him a TV, and it was so funny. But at the Fan Fest, for example, at halftime, people would get up to go to the bathroom. And people around me were uneasy when the second half started, and it wasn't the same people sitting around them. Like, it was legitimately like everything has to be the same. It's so funny. There was even a guy behind the screen in the park behind us that's waving an Argentina flag like this, and he, like, just back and forth, and we're just laughing because like this guy must be on something. Like he's on drugs or something. Like he's on because he just kept going. And I think the 70th or 80th minute, he stopped and there was a gasp in the crowd. Like, oh crap, this guy, where is he? We need to keep going. Turns out he was pulling off his shirt to just keep going again. Losing their minds. And it was such a crazy experience. People were so happy. It was a Tuesday night, so technically you're supposed to be working. I went out with my friends. We were out till 5 or 6. I had to go home because I had a meeting at 9 or 10 in the morning. And meanwhile, they were out till 8 or 9 in the morning or later, and it was just wild. Like, it was a crazy time. And from that day, from Tuesday night when Argentina was in the final till Sunday, it was it was utter chaos in the country. There was no one could focus. The amount of work that probably got done that week in Argentina is at an all-time low. I can imagine. It was just nuts. Everywhere you'd go, people were wearing Argentina jerseys. Everywhere you went, people would talk even more about it. About is De Paul, is he injured? Is he good to play? Like, it was just never-ending conversation about the World Cup. So it was just so amazing. The final day, it was funny. A lot of my friends had big parties that they had planned or going clubbing on Saturday night, the night before the World Cup. And I said, guys, like, I need to have a good sleep before this one, because whatever happens, it's going to be utter chaos. Like, I need to have a good sleep. So I actually went with some Argentine friends, and I went with some international friends, which this was a fascinating piece because one friend was Slovenian, one was Israeli, and one was German. And they were digital nomads working abroad in Argentina, and they were kind of living the Argentine the fever that was happening in Argentina. And so we went to the Fan Fest again, and this time we were crazy. We're in the middle of thousands and thousands of people in the Fan Fest, and it was just it was so crazy because people were so happy with the 2 goals and the 70 minutes of just joy that was going on, and we're so happy, and people are crying. Like, I was even crying, and these guys beside me are looking at me like, what is up with you? Why are you crying? You're not even Argentine. And I said, like, I can't tell you the amount of pain it's been for the last decade of being an Argentina fan, last 2 decades, and so I'm crying watching, thinking like we're winning 2-0. This is insane. And then everything happened, and you know what happened. But
Yes.
the equalizers came in. Then extra time, the third goal goes in. Mbappe, the tying goal goes in extra time, and I kid you not, there was a lady in front of me that threw up because she was just so stressed. There was just like it was just utter, like people couldn't.
Jeez.
It was it was a full body experience here. And when the penalty shootout happened, it was just like I have the park we were in Argentina. It's essentially it's like a clay dirt kind of thing in the underneath us. And so every time a goal celebrated, people are just grabbing and jumping up, and so it just this cloud of kind of clay dirt goes everywhere. And my shoes to these days to this day, I had to throw them out because my whole body was just covered in it. And the moment Argentina wins, you walk in Argentina, in Buenos Aires specifically, you do the walk to the obelisco, and so the obelisk, and so it was about an hour away, and we're exhausted, we're tired, we've just been screaming, no voices, the whole thing, and we start walking there, and people, I can't describe the joy in people's faces, and it was all ages. That was one thing that my international friends couldn't understand was. Thousands and thousands, like what was it, 4.5 million people were downtown that day, and we made it all the way to the actual obelisk, and it's like this. There's people climbing. Something about Argentines loving climbing things and breaking things, but they're you see people with their babies, you see people carrying strollers above them, you see 90-year-old grandparents walking down the street singing, crying, and it was a level of, I think for me, it had just full circle for me, because the biggest thing for this trip for me was having grown up there as a kid. This was my first time as an adult being able to enjoy Argentina in my own way with my own perspective and this whole thing. And so it just, like, I was crying the whole time. I was just a mess. And they would have 1 or 2 cars allowed to go on the streets, and they just had massive speakers, like the classic, like Bichero. I absolutely loved it. And they're just absolutely blasting Marado, Marado, or the national anthem or whatever. And it was just incredible. Like I have no words to describe the exuberance and the feeling that I had there. And it was even funny, like one of the guys I was with, he had claustrophobia, and which terrible place to be, first of all. And he's freaking out. He's like, guys, we need to get out of here. Like, we need to start moving. And we legitimately walked minimum 6 blocks, one direction, in any direction. And it was still the same. Like it was, we had to walk, I think it was 20, 25 minutes before we kind of got to some fresh air. And even then, there's still people, corridors. So it was, yeah. And then obviously I could go on forever about the night. Like it was, and I had a flight the next day at night, and yeah,
Good luck.
Sleep, let's say. It was absurd just how nuts that day was. So yeah.
That's insane. Let me ask you something a little bit more like in depth about specifically, because you talked about the penalty shootout and the dirt going up, right?
Yeah.
But a moment, me personally, I'm sure you probably feel the same way. Like for me, it's life change, like literally life changing. You know,
Yeah.
the moment where Montiel steps up. And you know, it's so weird because, you know, I tell my friends here, I'm like, this sounds ridiculous. Like if you look at it from outside, me telling you that a soccer game has changed my life, it sounds ridiculous. Like I'm just crazy, like psychopath, like relax, you know? But literally, to me, this has changed the way that I look at life, period. Right. And it might be an exaggeration, but like the way that I live life and the way that I live the sport, to me, that moment and like the emotions I felt were something that I've never felt before. This what I'm about to say is super exaggerated, but I'm gonna compare it to something super stupid. Not the actual thing, but the comparison is dumb, but I think it's the same feeling. So I, believe it or not, I have 4 kids, and just like having, like seeing, because when people ask you like, oh, how is it to have a child, and I'm like, it's a love that it's not comparable to any other love that you will ever feel. Like the way that, like, you loving your mom, loving your dad, loving your spouse, your girlfriend, whoever it may be, right? This The love for your kids, it's so completely different. Like
Mhm,
you could literally die.
mhm,
You would die for everybody else, but it's a different type of death. Like
mhm. Yeah.
for my children, like I would do anything, right? And this emotion was like that emotion, but in soccer.
Mhm.
Like it's weird.
Yeah.
But I want to go into the, like, I don't know if you can even describe it, right? But what was the emotion like for you personally? What were your thoughts?
Mhm.
You know, when he stepped up and he scored, and because I was like, I didn't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I sat down in my chair and I was like, what is going on? Like, ¿qué está
Yeah.
pasando? Like
Same.
literally, I could not believe it. I could not believe it. And I told everybody, and I told myself, I was like, the first thing that I'm gonna do, if it happens,
Mhm,
I'm gonna call my dad, and I'm
mhm.
gonna call my dad, and I'm gonna tell my dad, thank you
Yeah.
for making me a psychopath when it comes to soccer, because he's the same way, right?
Yeah.
Like, because this emotion is, it's different. And that's exactly what I did. And I was talking to my dad, and I would look at my dad, on the phone, and I would, and he was crying and I was crying, and I was like, what is going on? Like,
Mhm,
what, literally, dad, ¿qué está pasando? ¿Qué pasó? No entiendo. Like, and
mhm,
I'm in my house alone because my Kawala was watching the games by
mhm.
myself,
Yeah.
wearing the same shirt, wearing the same hat, you know,
Absolutely.
right? But what was your emotion like that specific moment? What hit you?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's you just mentioned the word "cabala," which is the key word for the superstition in Argentina. But yeah, no, it's something. What one of the just really quickly, like this is something that I would try to explain this when I moved back to Canada and the U.S. was countries like Brazil and Argentina, when the World Cup is won in these countries, it changes the economy. Like it changes the government, it changes the views people have on life. And so this is like just adding to that. For me personally, I there's a good 30 seconds when Montiel scored that goal where it doesn't matter like it doesn't matter the differences you have with the people around you, and it doesn't matter if you don't know them, if you've never met these people before. It's just utter euphoria. You are just so happy, and this is also, you mentioned this, and I would love to kind of specify this. That is very different. I find it's very specifically Argentine. Is you had an action item that you wanted to do right when it is like you wanted to call your dad right away, and that's something that Argentines do right away. And so from the quarterfinal to the final, all my Argentine friends that I would watch it with, that the first thing they'd do, call their dad or hug their siblings, or there's always one thing that was just, it's just such an emotional connection and such a crazy life changer. But for me watching it, there was 30 seconds where I'm just grabbing random people and embracing and screaming and crying, and like I think I literally was celebrating with some 50-year-old man in embrace, crying, sobbing, not sure what's going on. There's random, like, there's little girls that are screaming and crying, not really understanding what this moment means for their grandparents or their parents, or a lot of parents who hadn't seen Argentina win. Like it's such an undescribable feeling when Argentina wins a World Cup, or when your country wins a World Cup. And I think there's a few countries in the world that have this level of passion, but it's just um, like, to describe how football crazy Argentines are is it's impossible. Like it's actually it's a different it's religion essentially. It's just it's nuts how crazy these people are. And I'm so happy to have been able to share it. But it was people, I think, for the whole walk to the Obelisco, people were in shock. People were legitimately they couldn't believe it because they'd been through so much pain, and so it was a relief, as well as as what you were mentioning of like, ¿qué está pasando? Like this, like Messi is a World Cup winner is just it feels like there's so many problems in the world and something is right, you know, like Messi deserved a World Cup and he got a World Cup. And so for me personally, I was so happy. I couldn't care less what happened in the next 10 years of my life. At that moment, I was just in straight happiness and bliss. So it was great.
Yeah, and that's something I tell people, like Argentina could now win another World Cup for the rest of my life, and I would not care because I already felt it. It's kind of like, I mean, it's I don't know if this is also a terrible comparison, but it's like being a drug addict. Like I got the hit, you know, and like I'm gonna like, you know, I can try and chase it, but obviously I can't do anything about it. But it's like, you know, every time the World Cup comes, I'm gonna be chasing that feeling. But I already hit it. Like I already got it. So like I'm content. Like I could die today and I'll be like, I'm good, you know, type of thing.
It's funny you bring this up a little bit because there's a bunch of little stories about, I just couldn't believe even though I lived in Argentina for that time, I was back in Canada when the World Cup was playing when I was living here. And so sorry, living in Argentina. So I was never able to fully enjoy it. So this was a whole nother experience for me. I'd never experienced it. And so everything in that country was related to the World Cup. It was I would get pictures. The garbage would have a picture of Messi or Argentina in the front. It was everything. Drinks had something related to Argentina or the Argentine colors. There was milanesas, the famous food of Argentina. I don't know if you saw this meme, but this was an actual thing. There was restaurants that were making milaneses. It was a milanesa in the face of Messi. Like everything in the country. I would go to the gym and the trainers would stop everything. If something came up about the World Cup team, we would stop in the middle of a workout to be like, De Paul is playing or De Paul's not playing. I don't know if there's any country in the world that does that level of just craziness. And maybe it is a drug. Maybe it is that might be the best example of how nuts it is. But it's even I had one story after the quarterfinal game. I went in to go, my phone broke after the game, maybe because of the celebrations. But I need it for work. And so I run into a phone place and I'm getting it fixed in this quiet room, and people are still walking down the street celebrating. And this lady who's probably in her 80s starts banging on the window in an Argentina jersey. And she's literally, I just can't, I'm kind of confused. I'm like celebrating. I'm kind of confused to why she just keeps banging the window. And after the third time, she's literally just looking for me to turn and say, Vamos Argentina. I was like, this is nuts. These people are crazy. It was so amazing. So
that's crazy. Well, I think we can end this right here. I think we reach the height of emotions and stories and crazy. I'm sure there's a gazillion other stories that we could probably talk about on another time. But thank you, Josh, for jumping on. If people want to find you, if they want to ask you for more stories, where can they get you at?
Absolutely, yeah. On my Instagram at J2 as in the number 2. Rendle, Rendle, my last name, and then or on Twitter, which is at Josh Rendle, my name. So yeah, or follow Fanatis or Platense English, and you can always follow the Calamares, the Platense English. So see some crazy stuff on Twitter there.
There you go. So there you go. There you have it, people. Josh is everywhere, so it's easy to find him. He's in multiple spaces. But once again, man, thank you for jumping on. Thank you for sharing your stories and your literally your life here with us. And once again, just thank you. So everybody, don't forget to go to the YouTube channel. If you haven't, go subscribe. And you can just subscribe to or go to Twitter, Instagram, Cuadro Cuadro Dos on there. And we'll see you guys later. Have a good one.